I'm Irish. I'll tell you in a second why that matters, and then I'll drop my essay, glassed over eyes and all. That's a shout out to Bear Sage, by the way. He'll get it. Back to being Irish. The community in which I grew up was Irish. Period. Yes, ethnic Jewish as well, but that's not the thread of the thing. The Irish have trouble accepting help. Their belief is generally that charity is a moral failing. You did not work hard enough. You should have thought of that before you had so many kids. Anyone who has read Angela's Ashes knows that being on the dole, state and church funded charity, is the equivalent of wearing a scarlet letter in Irish society. I do not ask for help. Even if I'm bleeding to death, if someone asks me if they can help me, I just say I'm fine. We're always fine until we're not. Recently, I have been seeing how seemingly disparate people often respond to need with kindness. When I was sitting outside after my most recent endocrinology appointment, waiting in cold weather for my ride assist, Irish pride told me I had committed to outside, so outside was where I stayed. A woman wearing a hijab went into the building, then came back out, and asked me if I needed help. I told her I was fine. I was dressed like Randy in A Christmas Story, and the cold was still cutting through, but I wasn't in danger. Danger or not, her coming back outside to check on me is representative of what it means to be part of a community. My most recent medical crisis, some of you know about it, reminded me of community's importance. Substack rallied around me, a near stranger, and gave me hope where hope had faltered. Hope is an easy word to say, but it is hard to quantify. So, let me try to show you what hope looks like for me. When I was first diagnosed with LADA diabetes, the hospital was under COVID restrictions, and the tension in the ER was palpable. But because of those same restrictions, a child was born in one of the emergency bays. Everyone in that hospital ward heard the first cries of that child, and the tension lifted. Of course, this moment led me down a research rabbit hole into community and what keeps us bound together. This is where I discovered an idea born from anthropological observation. This idea is not the answer to all of our problems, but it shows us that our real nature is one of need and care, not something dark and unnamed. In fact, our nature has a name: Communitas. In July of 1989, a DC-10 lost all hydraulic control at 37,000 feet over Iowa. The crew of United Airlines Flight 232 had been trained for many failures. They had not been trained for this one. The tail engine had disintegrated, shredding the hydraulic lines that made the plane steerable. When the plane cartwheeled onto the runway in Sioux City, 112 people died. 184 survived. In the wake of the tragedy, investigators found something as interesting as the mechanical improvisation that kept the nose up: cooperation. Flight attendants braced strangers' heads against their own bodies. Passengers helped unbuckle seatmates. A businessman who had never met a farmer from Nebraska held his hand as the cabin broke apart. In catastrophe, status lost authority and something ancient took over. Victor Turner called this communitas. He studied rites of passage among a tribe in Zambia. He noticed that during certain rituals, social hierarchies temporarily dissolved. Chiefs and commoners entered what he described as a liminal space. Titles didn't matter, but the need for transition does. Communitas was not sentimental, but structural, emerging when people entered a certain moment together. Airplane cabins are not African initiation ceremonies. Graduation stages are not societal transitions. But these moments are all tied to communitas, demonstrating how we act in human accord when the situation calls for it. A wedding brings together relatives who might never otherwise speak. A funeral can shatter estrangement. Certain events bring us to the same eye line because they expose vulnerability. When everyone rallies to a human need, hierarchy often releases its grip. New York City in the wake of 9/11 suffered a massive blackout. We expected to see urban warfare, but what we saw instead was people helping each other, civilians directing traffic, cops carrying people who could not walk on their own. Biology has something to do with this. Researchers at the University of Oxford have studied synchronized movement in rowers, dancers, and even groups of people simply marching in time. Participants who move together show increased pain tolerance and greater willingness to cooperate. Endorphins rose and trust followed. You can see the same phenomenon at a concert. Thousands of people who disagree about politics or parenting style will sway as one. An entire stadium will chant in unison. Strangers will high five as if they have known each other forever. Synchronization is not ideological. Rather, it is a chemical reaction that points to a truth about our nature. The point becomes clearer in a famous experiment at a summer camp in Oklahoma. In 1954, social psychologist Muzaffar Sharif conducted what became known as the Robbers Cave experiment. Sharif divided 22 boys into two groups. The groups developed identities quickly. They named themselves, designed flags, competed for resources. Hostility escalated so predictably that it was almost like they were writing Lord of the Flies in real time. Insults turned into food fights, and food fights turned into full-scale raids on resources. Sharif tried to reduce conflict by lecturing the boys about unity. Nothing changed. So he introduced a few shared problems. One of these was the water supply. When it dried up, the boys had to cooperate to find a new resource. Something remarkable happened. Hostility declined, and not because the boys abandoned group identity, but because survival required cooperation. Shared vulnerability accomplished what moral exhortation could not. If you zoom out far enough, you see this pattern everywhere. Anthropologists have documented how societies mark birth, illness, and death. The rituals, the clothing, the songs may differ, but every culture creates communal spaces for the fragile moments. Grief is public in some societies and restrained in others, but it is never irrelevant. A death destabilizes the group, and a ritualistic care brings them into alignment. Childbirth provides another example. In industrialized nations, it often occurs in hospitals, but in other societies, it happens in homes with midwives. The setting changes, but the fact remains that new life demands cooperation. Someone cooks, someone holds the mother's hand, someone receives the baby. None of it happens in solitude. No civilization has ever solved infancy with rugged individualism. Humor has a similar binding force. Soldiers in World War I wrote home about trench jokes that were as dark as the mud they stood in. Comedians in authoritarian regimes use satire to speak truths that cannot be spoken plainly. Shared laughter lowers threat and signals safety. In laughter, the nervous system responds by releasing good chemicals into the brain, because laughter is rarely about the punchline alone. When we laugh and others laugh with us, we feel a kinship with them. We feel seen. We align in consciousness. The body doesn't simply function in coordination with communitas. It informs us when communitas is required. When children are hungry, an adult will go without food to make sure they are fed. Someone will go out in search of more food no matter the weather. The needs of the body are stubbornly democratic. Even in stratified societies, even when people are surrounded by enemies, communitas answers their needs. Consider the Underground Railroad, the Jews hidden from the onslaught of the Holocaust, the secret Christians who embodied charity under the Roman Empire, the Muslims who provided shelter and food to the orphaned children of their enemies during the Crusades. There are so many examples throughout history that reinforce the thesis, but it all points to one truth that is often overlooked. Need surpasses even the most rigid ideology. Whether we like it or not, we lean toward one another. And while that leaning may not solve every structural inequity, it does explain why strangers hold hands in falling airplanes, and why enemies can become allies when a basic need arises. Communitas begins in the body, and it iterates wherever people gather. If you have fear or shame or social anxiety or anything that stops you from reaching out to others, we understand. And we are not here to judge you. Just know that we are here. We are your community.